Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're actually starting a new book today. We're going to be in volume 7, which is Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. This is a collection of teachings from the Buddha about breathing mindfulness meditation. We're going to be in this book for about 3 or 4 weeks, going up to the chapter, I think it's 34, that we're going to be in this particular book. But we're going to go all the way through it over the course of multiple weeks. And just to kind of, start off with this particular book, I usually like to kind of just give kind of like an overview of what it is that we're going to be studying. What you're going to see in the teachings of the Buddha in this particular book is you're going to see him talking about how to do meditation. You're going to see him talking about the benefits of meditation and why it's important. You're going to see the amount of time that he used to meditate in terms of like his frequency of meditation. You're going to see all types of aspects of what he was teaching around meditation, because the way that the Pali Canon is organized is that it's actually not organized at all. It's got these 45 books that are this thick, and all the discourses are spread out all throughout the Pali Canon. So what this book series does is it consolidates it into the, hold on, it looks like we might have, yeah, I think that's on your side, Vibhav. So what this book does is this consolidates all the teachings of the Buddha into a one book that has the teachings of breathing mindfulness meditation, so that now in a relatively short period of time, you can work your way through and see all the teachings of the Buddha on breathing mindfulness meditation. As you guys probably know, if you've been studying the okay, so it's not in sync for you guys either. Okay, I must just be in Zoom here. Let's see. I don't know that I can do anything on my side. I apologize for those of you guys on the live stream. It looks like, let's see, automatically adjust microphone. Let's do this. I think this is about the only thing that I can do to be able to adjust it. Okay. All right. So they're talking on Zoom about the audio. So as you guys have probably already studied in all the foundational classes, is breathing mindfulness meditation is a pivotal part of your practice, because it's breathing mindfulness meditation that is training the mind to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration. These are two wholesome qualities that you're developing, but then you're also training your mind to let go. So the ultimate goal of breathing mindfulness meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts, but it's to notice your thoughts sooner and sooner and cut them off and let them go easier and easier. Sometimes people think that the Buddha sat under a tree and he meditated and then instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. It took the Buddha 6 years to get to enlightenment. So you wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment. There's other things that you need besides meditation, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. So it's an important part of your practice. But if you take the Eightfold Path, it's 8 individual factors. And if you do the math, each factor is about 12.5%. So if you now look at the sub-factors of each of those and you do the math, where meditation is one subcomponent of right concentration, then meditation is about 6.25% of your practice, where sometimes you go into certain environments and they spend a lot of time meditating. I mean, maybe 6, 8, 10, even 12 hours meditating. This isn't sustainable. As a household practitioner, you're going to need to be able to do many other things. You can go to the gym and you can spend 6 hours there. You can be looking at the TV. You can be, text messaging your friends. You can be chatting it up in the locker room. But that doesn't mean your workout is any better or any worse than someone who goes in for 30 minutes, does the work that they need to do, and then gets out of the gym. So what you're doing with this meditation is you're exercising the mind, and you really don't need anything more than about 30 minutes. I can count on one hand, maybe 2 hands, how many times I've done meditation for more than 30 minutes. And that doesn't mean you can't do meditation for longer than 30 minutes. It's just that the mind doesn't really truly need that much meditation. If you're doing 2 to 3 sessions a day for 30 minutes, that's really what it is that you'd like to build up to. So we're going to jump into our Pali Canon and English study group here, where we invite people from Zoom to be able to read a chapter from our book. then I'm going to share some teachings on that. And then I'm going to open up to whatever questions you guys might have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions. If you guys are reading these books ahead of time before class, that would be really helpful for you, because there's things like in this particular book that I'm not going to have time to break it down in class to the level of detail that I have in the books. So you will need to look at the books, and you can get those on our website. You can take them and go print them yourself. You can order them on Amazon. You can get them at our temple here in Chiang Mai. There's multiple ways for you to be able to acquire these books, because I'm going to be able to kind of talk in an overview with some of these chapters because they're quite long. Others will be able to penetrate into more deeply, but it really comes back to a summary of what I just shared, is that you're developing your meditation practice, understanding that it's important, but it's not every part of your practice. And you'd really like to get to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes, understanding that you're just gradually focusing on the breath, gradually training the mind, slowing the mind down by focusing on the breath, and now building that awareness of mind, where you ultimately are going to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is what we're going to be exploring as part of these chapters. So is there someone in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Okay, looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
Great fruit and benefit of breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And how, monks, is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit? Here, monks, a monk having gone to the forest to the foot of a tree or an empty hut sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. It is, monks, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, that it is of great fruit and benefit. One, monks, mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated in this way, one of 2 fruits may be predicted, either final knowledge or wisdom in this very life, or, if there is a residue of clinging, the state of non-returner.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. So here the Buddha is talking about the fruit and benefit of meditation. He does give a description of how he guides students in meditation, but here at the end, he's talking about the benefit. This isn't the only benefit, but these are 2 benefits that he's talking about. Remember, it's important not to take the teachings of the Buddha in isolation. You're going to see another discourse here in a moment where the Buddha talks about 7 different benefits associated with breathing mindfulness meditation. So here he's saying that if you're doing breathing mindfulness meditation, it leads to either final knowledge, which that is enlightenment, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you will know the path inside and out, backwards and forwards. It's like your operating system in your mind has been upgraded, and it's impossible for you to forever forget what it took for you to get to that enlightened mental state. So the Buddha refers to it as final knowledge. And you'll know you have attained final knowledge when it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you haven't experienced any discontentedness, because your mind would have had to fully cultivate the wisdom in order to be able to dismantle dependent origination and get to the point where you no longer have ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. That's why it's called final knowledge, because your mind's fully wise to what it takes to completely transform the mind. So that is enlightenment. So he's saying this meditation, it leads to enlightenment, or if there's just still a residual amount of clinging, meaning a little bit of clinging left, and you're in that 3rd stage of enlightenment, then it leads to that. And as you know, if you're in that 3rd stage of enlightenment, that being's going to be reborn into the heavenly world, and they're going to get to enlightenment in that existence. That's not the ideal way to do it, but that is an option. So you would like to be able to get to enlightenment where you experience this final knowledge. So this is the meditation that he's guiding students to be able to do. And we refer to it as breathing mindfulness meditation. Here it's being translated as mindfulness of breathing. The Pali word here is anapasanati. It's pronounced something similar to that. I really don't get into the Pali very much because you don't really need the Pali in order to be able to learn and practice the teachings. In fact, I see learning Pali as a hindrance or as a roadblock or an obstacle, because different people translate these Pali words in different ways. And if you try to learn in Pali, you're actually limiting the number of people that you can actually get help from. And then not everybody agrees what these Pali words mean, but there's kind of this mystique about the Pali language. And there's a certain amount of people in the world that really devote a lot of time and energy to looking at the Pali, where now we've actually got the words of the Buddha in languages like English and Thai and other languages. We really don't need to go back to the Pali any longer. If there's someone who's gotten to enlightenment with a certain language, then we have the teachings of the Buddha in that language, because that person, if they've gotten to enlightenment and they speak that particular language, then they would know what the Buddha taught in that, using that particular language. So we have the teachings of the Buddha in English. We don't need to go back to Pali, but you'll sometimes see people using this Pali word in order to refer to breathing mindfulness meditation, and you'll know what it is that they're talking about. So the Buddha walks through here and helps you to understand how he guides people in meditation. One of the ways you might think about this is that when we were children, our parents would have said, when they were teaching us about how to brush our teeth, is, okay, get out your toothbrush, hold it in your hand, take off the cap of the toothpaste, spread it over the top of your toothbrush, put it under the water, now put it in your mouth. There are all these steps that we would learn. But then after we've done that several times, then we just don't even focus on that stuff anymore, and we just do it. It just happens. We don't think about all those step-by-step things that we learned so many years ago as a child. So the Buddha would guide people in understanding how to practice meditation with a teaching like this. But then when you're actually doing the meditation, you just do it. So that's why, like, when you guys have been with me, when I guide meditation, I will guide it at first and giving instructions and guidance, but then it's just a matter of, okay, now there's this quiet time and just do meditation where you're focused on the breath. And anytime the mind was off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and come back to the breath. That's really what the Buddha is getting to here. But he's walking through step by step, just like you guys have been in classes with me before, and you've heard me do these kinds of things. So the first part is he talks about the location of where an individual would meditate. He talks about going to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or an empty hut. These are the places that they would meditate during the lifetime of the Buddha, where now it might be your bedroom or a park or your living room or your balcony or any number of different places. And then the Buddha did teach 4 positions to meditate in. Here he's referring to the seated position. But there's 4 positions: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you'll see in other discourses where he refers to these. But because seated position is the primary position, he's referring to that here. Then he's talking about folding the legs crosswise. This is an option for you, but there's other options too. Not everybody's going to be able to sit with their legs cross-legged, right? Not everybody even has legs because of impermanence. So he's kind of giving like a general broad way of meditating, but then there's all these uniquenesses because of impermanence that someone might practice. There's not just one way to do meditation in terms of your body position, but he's providing some guidance here that is helpful for somebody who's maybe looking to do meditation in this way, but there's other variations as well. Then when he talks about straightening up his body, what he's talking about here is having the sternum up and the shoulders back. The upper body being erect, it keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. That's why he taught it. Whereas if you're slouched with the upper body, the mind has a tendency to be complacent or dull or lethargic. But if you're real rigid with the upper body, the mind can be overactive. So you need to have the upper body in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back. So this is oftentimes translated as straightened. His body or his upper body is erect and things of this nature. Then he talks about setting up mindfulness in front of you before you start meditating. This is bringing awareness to your mind, that you're not interested in just plopping down into meditation. Mindfulness is awareness of mind, but more specifically, it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So you're not interested in just plopping into meditation, because in that situation, it'll be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you actually start experiencing benefit. Instead, you would like to bring some general awareness to the mind. And one of the things that I teach to accomplish this is the chanting. Now, you can chant in order to set up mindfulness in front of you, but you can get to enlightenment and train your mind without chanting nowadays, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, you had to chant because that's how they committed the teachings to memory. So you don't necessarily need to chant, but you do need to set up mindfulness in front of you before you start meditating. So that might mean you take your meditation position, whatever that is, and start bringing some general awareness to the mind before you actually start to attempt to meditate. Then you start establishing your breath. Just mindful, meaning aware of the mind, you start breathing in and you're breathing out. This is establishing the breath. Then you start fixating the mind on the breath. That's where if you know that the breath is long or short, that means that your mind is fixated on the breath, because you wouldn't know whether the mind is or whether the breath is long or short if you didn't have your mind fixated on it. So you've taken your position, you've brought some mindfulness to the mind, you're starting to establish the breath, breathing in and out, and now you fixate your mind to the breath. That's the first part that you guys have heard me talk about many times and guide you in if you've done meditation with me. Once you've got that established, now you're going to start potentially experiencing the body, meaning you might start noticing bodily sensations, like an itching sensation or things like this, maybe certain sensations over the skin of the body. Here, what you would like to do is calm that, because while there might be some physical sensation on the body, the mind is able to control that. What the mind typically wants to do in that situation is hurry up and itch it. There might be a certain urge to do that. But what you would like to do is be able to get to the point where you've trained the mind to understand that this body can't be permanently comfortable. It's not possible. So you're training the mind to be comfortable with all this impermanence in the world, and bodily sensations are just one of the things that is impermanent about this world, is that you're going to notice some bodily sensations from time to time. So if you can notice that, you're not necessarily looking for it, you're not being aware for it, you're not like looking out for it, but as you do start experiencing different sensations and your mind becomes aware of it, that's where you then calm that within the mind, so you don't have this urge to just go and scratch. Then as you're doing that, you might notice that the mind has this joy and peacefulness that starts coming into the mind, because you're starting to let that go of that urge to just scratch and itch and be attentive to the body and wanting it to be permanently comfortable. So there can be this joy and this peacefulness that comes into the mind. And this is unconditioned joy and unconditioned peacefulness that starts peering through in the mind. Some of the pollutions get pushed back, and you start noticing these unconditioned mental qualities starting to shine through. But not only will you have that, but then you also perhaps experience other mental activity too, like various thoughts and ideas starting to roam through the mind. You might have a bombardment of thoughts, or you might indulge in a thought for a period of time. As you're experiencing mental activity, you need to be able to calm that. That's where you're training your mind to cut off and let go and come back to the breath. Now, as you're starting to calm the mind through cutting off and letting go, and you start experiencing certain mental conditions, this is the condition of the mind. And as you start noticing the general condition of the mind, that's where you might notice that the mind's a little bit irritable or a little bit grumpy, or you might notice that it's pleased or other things like that. And what you would like to do is apply effort to gladden the mind. That's bringing the mind to a point where it's uplifted, where it's cheerful and it's bright. You're going to need to apply the effort to do that within your meditation. So whatever you notice about the condition of your mind while you're in meditation, you would like to kind of uplift it a bit while you're in meditation. That's going to help you throughout your day. And you're going to be interested in concentrating the mind, bringing it to a single focus where you're just focused on the breath. That's helping you to develop that focus so that you can, in day-to-day life, have that concentration. And now the mind's going to start to letting go more and more. That's what the liberation is, where the mind's getting more and more liberated. It's starting to let go. And one of the ways that you help this to occur is through understanding impermanence, that whatever thoughts or ideas or feelings that are coming through the mind, understand they are impermanent. If you're noticing any bodily sensations, you understand that those are impermanent. If you're noticing any boredom coming to the mind while you're meditating, just understand that that boredom is impermanent, and you just keep working through that, right? So just understand that everything you're experiencing is impermanent. Even this life itself is impermanent. And now understand that all these things are going to be fading away, and there's going to be this elimination of all these things that are going on in the mind. And then ultimately what the Buddha is guiding you to get to is letting go. That's what the mind needs to do, is let go, let go, let go. And each one of these things that he's talking about training, notice he keeps coming back to, I will breathe in and I will breathe out. What he's meaning is just stay focused on the breath. No matter what's happening in your meditation, just keep coming back to the breath. Keep coming back to the breath. Keep coming back to the breath. So you don't need to think about each one of these statements while you're in meditation. If you've been learning breathing mindfulness meditation with me through the guidance that I share, I've consolidated all of this into guidance that will get you going and headed in the right direction for doing meditation. And now as you practice that, you can get better and better at it, more proficient. And as you practice it regularly, along with all the other teachings, that's where the Buddha is saying it leads to these two things, either enlightenment or the third stage of enlightenment. And of course, there's more than just meditation, but that's where this meditation leads to, is these two states. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. I just had a general question about meditation back in the time of Buddha. It seems like most of their energy and time went to just, surviving. Was meditation or the practice of meditation something that people were already aware of back then? Were they already doing it, or was it a completely new concept that he was teaching?
There was meditation being practiced prior to the Buddha. They even had the idea of Gama around prior to the Buddha. Even the idea of enlightenment, they just didn't understand what it was 100%. These things were being talked about and discussed, but the Buddha brought a level of clarity to it that didn't exist prior to him. So they were aware of these things and people were even doing them, but they weren't necessarily doing it in the way that he taught and with the full understanding of all the other pieces that go together in order to be able to get to enlightenment and even knowing what enlightenment is.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. I don't see any questions here. So we'll go to the next chapter. You're going to see here in this particular chapter with the text that I've shared is I go through and I break down each individual statement that the Buddha shares. I did it kind of in short form here in class, but here I actually talk about it in detail for each individual statement that the Buddha is sharing. So this is what I was sharing, that I don't have time to go through this level of detail, but you have it right here in the book. So you guys can take your time to read that and be able to understand what the Buddha is guiding you here for. And then also at the same time, what you guys are going to see in this particular book is there's going to be a lot of repeating of the Buddha's giving guidance. So what we're going to end up doing with these chapters is we're going to be skipping over this part that we just read and Samantha just read. We're just going to be focused on the unique part about the first part of the discourse and the last part of the discourse. So Kristen, were you interested in reading? Is that why your hand was up, or did you have a question?
Well, I had a question, but I can read also. The question was just when we sit in meditation, when we settle in and we, start to focus on our breathing. So the idea of like experiencing, like the body, which I always do, but then I always seem to kind of skip all the other stuff, like when the mind starts to think, or it starts to have takes me away sometimes. The idea of like experiencing it, I guess that word to me sounds like I'm sitting in it for a little while, but not necessarily in meditation, correct? Like it's more like a noticing, or should I be really experiencing it? Because I guess that sort of sounds a little confusing to me.
Yeah. So if I can maybe add some words here that would really help you. So where the Buddha says he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. Instead, the way you might think about this is when he experiences the body, focus the mind on the breath, breathe in. When he experiences the whole body, when you're experiencing things going on in the body, focus on the breath going out. So whenever you're having these experiences, just keep focusing on the breath. So that's what he's saying here. Instead of like dwell in that or let the mind experience that, he's saying like when you experience this, focus on the breath. I will breathe in, I will breathe out.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Kristen, were you interested in reading, or were you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Let me just pull it up. My eyes aren't that good. I can't see that far. Okay. Chapter 2. 7 predicted fruits and benefits of breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, mindfulness of breathing mindful meditation, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And how, monks, is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit?
If you could,
Dear monk, should I skip all that?
Yeah, if you could skip all the way down here.
When monk starts, okay.
That's fine too.
Should I go when monks mindfulness of breathing, or is it is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. When monks mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated in this way, 7 fruits and benefits may be predicted. And what are the 7 fruits and benefits? 1, one attains final knowledge, wisdom, early in this very life. 2, if one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life, then one attains final knowledge, wisdom, at the time of death. 3, if one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life or at the time of death, then with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana, enlightenment, between one life and the next. 4, if one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life or at the time of death, or become an attainer of nibbana between one life and the next, then the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana, enlightenment, upon landing. 5, if one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life or at the time of death, or become an attainer of nibbana between one life and the next, or become an attainer of nibbana upon landing, then with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana, enlightenment without extra effort. 6. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life or at the time of death, or become an attainer of nibbana between one life and the next, or become an attainer of nibbana upon landing, or become an attainer of nibbana without extra effort, then with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana with the extra effort. 7. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life, or at the time of death, or become an attainer of nibbana between one life and the next, or become an attainer of nibbana upon landing, or become an attainer of nibbana without extra effort, or become an attainer of nibbana with extra effort, then with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes one bound upstream, heading towards the heavenly realm. When monks' mindfulness of breathing has become developed and cultivated in this way, these 7 fruits and benefits may be predicted.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So as you guys have heard me share before, it's important to never look at the teachings of the Buddha in isolation, because that last discourse, if somebody would have just read that and that's it, they might think that those are the 2 benefits of breathing mindfulness meditation. And with the teachings of the Buddha being spread out over multiple books, then if somebody came across that other discourse, they might just be like, all right, eureka, I found it. The 2 benefits of breathing mindfulness meditation. But you guys are going to see, not only do we have that discourse and this discourse, but there's going to be other discourses too, where the Buddha is adding to it, right? He's kind of coming at it from these different angles, depending on who he's talking to, because he doesn't give everything all at once. In order to be able to get to enlightenment, a student needs gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So a teacher doesn't just say, all right, here's the however many benefits and just lay it all on. Instead, the student needs to gradually learn each individual piece. So here's 7 more benefits related to the breathing mindfulness meditation. And he already talked about some of these in the previous discourse. Like this first one attains final knowledge or enlightenment. So that's one of the benefits, similar to the previous discourse, where the previous discourse was just 2 things. Now he's going to go into more detail. So this second benefit, he's talking about if you didn't attain enlightenment during your life, then you can actually attain it at death, right? We've talked about that, how that's a possibility. Ideally, you would get to enlightenment during your life, but if you don't, and you got to enlightenment at death, well, that's the next best option, because at least you're not going to be reborn back into the world and experience the difficulties and struggles all over again. But you would have still been irritated or annoyed to a certain degree on your way through life, and you never got to a point where you were fully peaceful and joyful. But nonetheless, at least you got to enlightenment at death. So that's an option too, and that's a benefit of practicing breathing mindfulness meditation. The next one is if those things didn't happen for you, with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, an individual will now attain enlightenment between one life and the next. That the mind hasn't actually landed into a new life yet, but it attained enlightenment in that middle period. You don't really hear the Buddha talk much about that middle period or giving it any kind of name or anything like that. But here he's talking about it in terms of it's possible for someone to attain enlightenment between one life and the next. And that's a decent option too, right? Because at least there's not rebirth. Then the fourth one here, he's talking about attaining enlightenment upon landing. That's that if you've already eliminated the 5 lower fetters in one life, now the mind hasn't gotten to enlightenment, but on its way to its next existence, upon landing, it hasn't actually landed in that next existence yet, that it's attained enlightenment right there when it actually lands in that new existence. Right? So in this particular case, because they would have eliminated the 5 lower fetters, that would be in the heavenly realm, that they would have attained enlightenment upon landing. Then the fifth one here is that they would have still have eliminated the 5 lower fetters. So that means they're on their way to the heavenly realm and they attain enlightenment without any extra effort, meaning it was like pretty straightforward and pretty easy for them to be able to get to enlightenment in that next life. Then the next one is, again, they're headed towards the heavenly realm because they've eliminated the 5 lower fetters, and now they attain enlightenment with extra effort. So it would still be in that heavenly realm. And then the seventh one here is that they've eliminated the 5 lower fetters, and then now they're headed towards the heavenly realm. And now they haven't necessarily got to enlightenment right there, but some point during that existence, they would get to enlightenment, right? So these are the benefits, that it definitely leads to enlightenment. That's the underlying message here, is that's what the breathing mindfulness meditation is there for. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Looks like Kristen has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
It's Ted. Thank you, Teacher David. Would you wind up in the heavenly realm after any one of these 7? Because I was under the impression that when you do land in a new existence, you're kind of starting from scratch, so to speak, as opposed to having the first 5 fetters addressed already as you enter a new existence.
Yeah, so it's not just one way, Ted. This is the way we tend to think about it, right? It's like oftentimes the mind looks at the world as black and white, but it's not that way. In fact, you can even get to the heavenly realm without even eliminating the 5 lower fetters, right? Like even prior to the jhanas, there's people who can get into the heavenly realm even without having even gotten into the jhanas yet. They can still get into the heavenly realm. So there's multiple ways for someone to be able to get into the heavenly realm. But what the Buddha is focusing on here is that if you've eliminated the 5 lower fetters, and showing what this breathing mindfulness meditation produces, and these are 7 different options of what could potentially occur. And they're not all the same. They're all slightly different.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. All right, so we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 3. This is a pretty significant one, so it looks like Pat's up to bat for that one. If you need help, Pat, just let us know. I don't think you do, but just let us know.
Good. Cultivating mindfulness of breathing fulfills 4 foundations of mindfulness, 7 factors of enlightenment, true wisdom, and liberation. There is, monks, one thing which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills 4 things, and 4 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 7 things, and 7 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 2 things. Concentration by mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation, monks, is the one thing which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, when developed and cultivated, fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment, when developed and cultivated, fulfill true wisdom and liberation. Mindfulness of breathing fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. How, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his back, his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful, he breathes in, mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long, or breathing out long, he knows I breathe it out long. Breathing in short, he knows I breathe in short, or breathing out short, he knows I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. Whenever a monk, when breathing in long, knows, I breathe in long. Or when breathing out long, knows, I breathe out long. Or when breathing in short, knows, I breathe in short. Or when breathing out short, knows, I breathe out short. When he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this a certain kind of body, monks. That is, breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever a monk trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this a certain kind of feeling, monks. That is, close attention to breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever a monk trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I say, monks, that there is no development of concentration by mindfulness of breathing for one who is muddled and who lacks clear comprehension. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever a monk trains thus, Reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in when he trains thus. Reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out when he trains thus. Reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in when he trains thus. Reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out when he trains thus. Reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in when he trains thus. Reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out when he trains thus. Reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in when he trains thus. Reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Having seen with wisdom what is the abandoning of craving and displeasure, the monk is one who looks on closely with equanimity. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way that it fulfills the four foundations of mindfulness.
Okay.
Four foundations of mind.
Let's talk about this for a second. Give you a chance to rest too, Pat. Not that you need it, but it'll be a good chance for you to catch your breath a little bit. So what we've got here is we've got the Buddha saying that breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the fulfillment of multiple things. That by doing breathing mindfulness meditation, it leads to the development of the four foundations of mindfulness. Developing the four foundations of mindfulness are going to ultimately lead to the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment, which ultimately is then going to lead to true wisdom and liberation, which is enlightenment itself. So here, the Buddha is just setting that up in the first, 2 paragraphs. Then he goes through his normal way of sharing the guidance that he does. He completely shows all of his guidance that he actually does for an entire meditation, but then he breaks it down and shows you which section of that guidance is leading to fulfilling each one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are being aware of the bodily sensations, that early warning system that's alerting you that you're about to experience any conditioned feeling. Then there's the feelings themselves. Then there's the condition of the mind. Then there's the mental objects, which is the 10 fetters, those deeply rooted containers in the mind that is what you're purifying the mind of. So you're going to need to have awareness of all of these things so that you can then apply right effort. But the way that you cultivate those 4 foundations of mindfulness is in meditation and then also practicing outside of meditation. So he goes through the first section of his meditation guidance that goes from the beginning all the way up to calming the bodily sensations. And he's saying, okay, that part right there, when you're doing that, that's what's helping you to develop the foundation of mindfulness as body, being aware of those bodily sensations. That's what he's talking about here. Okay. Then he says, okay, that part from experiencing joy all the way through to calming the mental activity, that's what's helping you to develop the foundation of mindfulness of feelings as feelings so that you can be aware of the arising feelings. And then he explains that here as well. Then that next part where it's experiencing the mind all the way to liberating the mind, that's where you're developing the awareness of the condition of the mind and what's happening in the general condition of the mind. And now he's explaining that at the end of this paragraph and then with this content here. Then in terms of developing the awareness of the mental objects, it's from reflecting on impermanence all the way to letting go. And that's where the mind is now developing the ability to be aware of those mental objects. And he explains that, okay, now having done that, an individual is letting go and removing this craving and displeasure in regard to the world, because this is what the mind has in the unenlightened state. It's like craving the world to be a certain way, and then having displeasure that the world is not that way, that the world's not functioning the way that you want it to function. So if you see a school shooting, or you see a war breakout, or you see that there's a murder or a rape, there's maybe a craving for the world to be a certain way, and now there's this displeasure with how the world is functioning, and there's essentially this disgruntledness in the mind. But by the time that you've fully developed your mindfulness, your mind is let go of that, and you understand the world is functioning according to these natural laws. It's not going to function according to the way your mind has always envisioned the world to function. It's going to function according to these natural laws. And that means that right now there's billions of beings in the world that have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, and they're going to be out there doing a bunch of unwise stuff. And you're going to hear about that on the news, for example, about those unwise things. But if you have craving for the world to be a certain way, you will then have displeasure in regards to the world. But if you get rid of that craving and understand the world is functioning based on these individual decisions that people are making through craving, anger, and ignorance, then you don't have this displeasure in the world. You can still understand that, yeah, this world is not in a good shape whatsoever, but you don't have that disgruntledness and that frustration because you understand why the world is functioning the way that it is. And this is where the mind now comes into equanimity. That's the calmness and composure, the evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. The mind can be more calm and composed there. And now what that's going to all lead to is being able to now develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Because with that equanimity, in having removed the craving in regards to the world and that displeasure, there's going to be concentration that starts to come into the mind. And now there's this fulfillment of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which with those 4 foundations of mindfulness, now you'll be able to develop the 7 factors of enlightenment. Because the very first factor of enlightenment is to have mindfulness and awareness of mind. So you need to have that awareness of mind in order to be able to now, fine tune the mind with these 7 factors. These 7 factors are 7 tools that you use to tweak the mind and fine tune the mind. They're not to determine whether you are enlightened or aren't enlightened. It's another tool. But you can't use this tool until you've had the ability to develop your mindfulness fully. So that's why the meditation is leading to these 4 foundations of mindfulness being developed, so that now you can apply this next layer of tools from the 7 factors of enlightenment. So let me see if you guys have any questions on this first before we go on. So it looks like John has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Teacher David. I just have a question on this, the second part of the guidance for the breathing mindfulness meditation. He talks about these different, things that we're letting go of, especially as we get into the mental objects. And I'm wondering if these are kind of proscriptive objects that we will experience as we improve in meditation, or if, what's the significance, I guess, of those? Like, should I expect to let go, go back to my breath, like when I experience fading away? Like, are these things I should be aware of and expect to occur in my meditation?
It's that when these things are happening, keep bringing the mind back to the best breath. So you don't need to expect that it will happen. But if you're practicing the way that the Buddha is teaching, which is focus on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off, you cut it off and let go and come back, these things will happen, that there will be a fading away. And then as the mind notices that, like, so say you're focused on the breath, there's a thought that comes up, your mind notices that the thought's there, and then the thought fades away. Well, what the Buddha is saying is come back to your breath. That's what he's saying. So you don't have to expect that these things are occur, but whenever it is occurring, and you notice there's a thought, the thought fades away, just come back to the breath. Come back to the breath. And where possible, you would actually like to abruptly cut off that thought. You don't just sit there and wait for it to fade away. You apply effort to be able to cut it off and bring the mind back to the breath, knowing that it will fade away.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any other questions, so we're going to continue on here. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. 4 foundations of mindfulness fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. And how monks are the 4 foundations of mindfulness developed and cultivated so that they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment? Whenever monks a monk resides reflecting on the body as body. On that occasion, unmuddled mindfulness is established in that monk. Whenever monks, unmuddled mindfulness has been established in a monk, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. Residing thus mindfully, he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it. Whenever a monk residing thus mindfully penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of investigation is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of investigation. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of investigation goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. When he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, his energy is aroused without slackening. Whenever a monk's energy is aroused without slackening as he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of energy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. When his energy is aroused, there arises in him joy. Whenever joy arises in a monk whose vitality is aroused, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of joy is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of joy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of joy goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. For one whose mind is uplifted by joy, the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil. Whenever the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil in a monk whose mind is uplifted by joy, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of tranquility. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. For one whose body is tranquil, and who is joyful, the mind becomes concentrated. Whenever the mind becomes concentrated in a monk whose body is tranquil and who is joyful, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of concentration. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. He becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. Whenever a monk becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. Whenever a monk resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects, on that occasion, unmuddled mindfulness is established in that monk. Whenever unmuddled mindfulness has been established in a monk, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. The remaining three foundations of mindfulness should be elaborated as in the case of the first foundation of mindfulness. He becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. Whenever a monk becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. It is, monks, when the four foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated in this way that they fulfill the seven factors of enlightenment.
Okay, thank
Did you
you.
want me to stop? And
Yeah, let's just kind of pause for a second. I'm not going to go through the 7 factors of enlightenment in detail because I've taught this in other classes, but I would like to at least just give a little bit of an overview and then see what questions you guys have, because you're going to need the 7 factors of enlightenment in order to be able to get to enlightenment. The first foundation is mindfulness, or awareness of mind. That's the same mindfulness that you learn about in the Eightfold Path, where you're watching over the mind with awareness. And more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you're aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. And then whenever you notice your mind sluggish, you lift the mind out of that through practicing investigation, energy, and joy. You're going to need to apply the effort to bring that into the mind. Then whenever you notice your mind is overactive and excited, you bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. That's what's going to bring the mind to the middle. So the goal here is to keep the mind in the middle, because if you allow the mind to stay on the outer edges, it'll just tend to fire that way. It's going to tend to be sluggish and dull, or it's going to stay in that overactive, excited state. And now, if you're not doing the work to apply effort to bring it to the middle, then there's complacency in the mind. And the longer that you allow the mind to stay in this state, either sluggish or overactive with complacency, the longer it's going to stay there. So if with your mindfulness can be really well tuned, that whenever you see your mind in either of those 2 states, you can bring it to the middle. Now more and more it'll stay there. This is the analogy that you guys have heard me use when I teach the Eightfold Path about the piece of wood in the steel rod grinding back and forth. I talk about this in regards to concentration and practicing singleness of mind, about how the steel rod's bouncing around. But if you get that steel rod going back enough, back and forth, you get a nice groove going and it doesn't bounce out, right? Well, it's the same thing here, that if you allow your mind to stay in that dull and lethargic state or that overactive state, it's bouncing around. You're trying to bring it to the middle so that more and more it'll just stay in the middle. And eventually, when you fine tune the mind this way, it'll just stay there all the time. That's where the mind is actually enlightened. So let me know if you guys have questions about the 7 factors of enlightenment. These are detailed in Volume 1, Chapter 3, but I would like to be sure you guys have a chance to ask questions about them. Okay, we have something coming in on YouTube here. Let's see. The question here is, other than the spiritual benefits, what other benefits one can have in worldly, materialistic life, how this helps one in their work or their material pursuits, sir? So the path to enlightenment isn't about material pursuits. It's not about acquiring any particular material object. It's about getting to enlightenment, where your mind is completely peaceful and joyful, where there's no discontentedness whatsoever. That's the ultimate goal. By doing so, you would need to clean up the pollution in the mind. And by doing so, whatever career you're in, whatever method that you're using in order to acquire resources, you're only going to do that better, because the mind is now functioning better through not having pollutions in the mind. The ultimate goal is not to acquire materialistic things. The ultimate goal is to purify the mind, get to enlightenment where there's no discontentedness. But part of the benefit, there's going to be potentially material gain if somebody chooses to go in that direction. But they're going to be earning their resources ethically and morally responsibly, and they're not going to be tied to their money. They're going to be willing to share their resources with others. So that should help you there. If you have anything else, let me know. Let's see. I don't see any questions anywhere else. So now, Pat, we can continue on here if you'd like to continue there.
Sure. 7 factors of enlightenment fulfill true wisdom and liberation. How monks are the 7 factors of enlightenment developed and cultivated so that they fulfill true wisdom and liberation? Here, monks, a monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of investigation, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of energy, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of joy, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of tranquility, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of concentration, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. It is, monks, when the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed and cultivated in this way that they fulfill true wisdom and liberation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So what the Buddha is getting to here is that this meditation leads to enlightenment. That's what he said in those other discourses. But now what the Buddha is doing is he's going all the way in this deep level of detail and showing you exactly how that happens. Where before he says, hey, this meditation, it leads to enlightenment. And now he walked you through all the individual details to be able to help you see that. So we went from meditation to developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness to develop the 7 factors of enlightenment. And now as you're practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment, this is going to mature in your mind releasing. Because when the mind's in that sluggish, dull state, or when it's in that overactive state, there's some craving, desire, attachments there that's happening in the mind. That's why the mind's being taken in those directions. So when you use these 7 factors of enlightenment to bring the mind to the middle and keep it there, that analogy that I talked about with the steel rod going back and forth, eventually the mind's going to mature and mature and mature and mature. And whatever cravings were in there that was taking it in these opposite directions, it's going to release those. That's what the Buddha is talking about of maturing and release, that the mind's going to mature, mature, and mature. You're going to grind that steel rod back and forth so much by keeping your mind in the middle that eventually your mind will release and it will no longer be pulled into that overactive, excited state, and it won't be pulled into that dull, lethargic, complacent state either. So that's why the Buddha is saying that this leads to true fulfillment of wisdom and liberation, because all of these things are building on each other and ultimately getting the mind to where it needs to be, which is right there in the middle, experiencing the gladness, the cheerfulness, the bright disposition, where it's uplifted at all times. That's the enlightened mental state. So let me know if you guys have questions on this here, where the Buddha is talking about how the 7 factors of enlightenment lead to enlightenment itself, where the mind's completely liberated, having released any craving or clinging that's in the mind. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So now let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter 4. This is another discourse similar to what we have been reading. I think just in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of jump over this one. Does anybody have any questions on this one here? This is similar to what we've been reading so far, just another discourse. Okay, I don't see any questions there. So if you guys happen to read this, or if you've already read it, if you have questions, you can always come back at and let me know either through private message or posting in our Facebook group or any of the other methods that I have for you guys to get questions answered. Okay, so now we'll go to chapter 5, which we've already read a section of this in the previous discourses. This is where the Buddha is really honing in on what's developing the first foundation of mindfulness, of being aware, being aware of the bodily sensations. So this is just an extract out of that discourse where you can see where the Buddha is really honing in on that. So we've already talked about that in this class. If you guys read this and you have any questions, you can let me know, but it's very similar to what we've already been reading. And now we can go to number 6, which this one is helping you to understand how the mind is developing. I think this, actually, we can read this one. Let's read this one because there's something in here that will help you guys. So would somebody like to read this one? Looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am. We don't need to read this middle part here, just the opening paragraph and the ending paragraph.
Mindfulness of the body. Here a monk, gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him, ever mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. As he resides thus diligent, dedicated, and determined, his memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. With their abandoning, his mind becomes steadily internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. That is how a monk develops mindfulness of the body.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So whether you're meditating or even in your day-to-day life, you would like to abandon any thoughts that are coming up of things that you did in the past. Let's just say, the Buddha's talking about household life here, right? But what he's really talking about for these people who are ordained with him is things from the past. Let's just say you used to be a wild party animal, right? You used to go out drinking and going to the clubs and staying up until 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. And now you've gotten on this path and you're on this path for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And somewhere along the lines, your mind starts kind of like going to the past and you start reveling in that. Whether it's in meditation or whether it's in your day-to-day life, you would like to abandon that and realize that's not your life anymore. Because oftentimes we can have fond memories of those things, but we don't look at all the turmoil that we experienced during that period of time in our life either, right? We tend to kind of revel in some of the pleasurable things that we remember from those time frames. Whether it was a certain boyfriend or girlfriend, or there was a certain situation, maybe we were doing stealing, or maybe we were having 2, 3, 4, 5 girlfriends or boyfriends or partying or whatever. We don't think about all the turmoil and all the difficulties that we had during that period of time. Our mind just focuses on the pleasurable things that we experience. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here when he says you abandon those things. You're going to remember that you did those things. You'll always remember that, even when you're enlightened. But you're not interested in allowing your mind to dwell in that and revel in that. By abandoning that, that's where your mind can become steadied and it can be brought to singleness. So whenever you see your mind doing that, whether it's in meditation or in your day-to-day life, even you're just taking a shower and you're reminiscing, that's the word, right? If you're reminiscing about this past where we were doing all these unwholesome things, you tend to focus on the pleasurable part of that. We don't look at the turmoil. So you need to pull your mind away from that and realize that that's not the life that you're living anymore. You're living this wholesome life and walking towards enlightenment. And that's where the mind can be brought to this quietness and singleness and concentrated rather than allowing it to be pulled to the past. And that's what the Buddha is guiding his students towards here. So any questions on this aspect of meditation, but also even practicing in daily life? Looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
With this not dwelling or reminiscing, is it still okay to think about the past, whether it be, well, probably more in the negative sense, if you had something bad happen, in order to learn from it, not necessarily dwell on it and have it become a heavy thought, but just to think back and, to see perhaps some bad patterns that you had. So there must be a middle way of thinking about past events, or should you not think of them in the positive or the negative?
Yeah, what you just described is the middle way, is that you can look back to things in your past to learn from it and realize, okay, if that thing happened today, I would handle it differently. I would handle it like this. But what that is that's the cultivation of wisdom. What you're not interested in doing is allowing the mind to form conditioned feelings based on those things. The Buddha doesn't necessarily specifically mention that here, but that's what he's talking about when he's talking about steadying the mind, bringing it to the singleness, is he's talking about don't let your mind form conditioned feelings based on these things in the past. So if you're just looking at it to cultivate wisdom of things you could improve, or even things that you did well and that you would like to continue to do, there's no harm in that. That's actually very beneficial. But just don't allow your mind to form the conditioned feelings where you're reminiscing and having all these pleasurable thoughts about certain things that you did in the past.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So we'll move to the next chapter. Here, this is chapter 7. Would somebody like to read this one? Okay, looks like Kristen. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Mindfulness of breathing leads exclusively to Nirvana, enlightenment. Monks, there is one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, experience, to enlightenment, to Nirvana. What is that one thing? Mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation. This is that one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nirvana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So it doesn't get any more clear than this. The Buddha is saying, hey, this meditation that he's teaching, it leads to one goal, one objective, and that is to get to enlightenment. He's not saying you only need one thing in order to be able to get to enlightenment. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 44 volumes of books from the Pali Canon, and that's not even everything that he taught. There's some stuff that's not in there, right? So he's just saying here that, hey, this meditation has one purpose, one goal, that is to get you into enlightenment. So it doesn't get any more clear than this. Any questions on the purpose of meditation and what your ultimate goal is with this meditation? Okay, I don't see any questions here. So now we'll go to chapter 8. Here looks like Pat, and we can do the same thing here where we're reading the first section, skipping over all the detail, and then going to the last part.
Concentration by mindfulness of breathing leads to the abandoning of the fetters. Monks, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, leads to the abandoning of the fetters. And how monks... Where you go?
Let's go.
Okay. It is in this way, monks, that concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, so that it leads to abandoning of the fetters.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So yeah, this whole section in the middle is the stuff that we've already read. And you can see I put that little thing here, but even this we've already read. So what the Buddha is teaching here is that this meditation, or breathing mindfulness meditation, it leads to the elimination of the 10 fetters, which he did that in summary form in the previous discourse, saying, hey, this meditation, it leads to enlightenment. Well, how do you get to enlightenment? You've got to eliminate the fetters. So this meditation leads to the elimination of the fetters, because as he said in a previous discourse, that it leads to the development of the 4 foundations of mindfulness: the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. The fetters are all mental objects. So if this meditation is leading to awareness of those fetters, you will be aware of the symptoms that are coming up, and then you can apply effort to eliminate that when it's coming up in the mind. So this meditation is leading to enlightenment through helping you eliminate the actual fetters in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to chapter 9. Would somebody like to read this one? We're going to do essentially the same thing we did with Pat there. All right, Samantha. So I'll highlight the section that we'll read.
Concentration by mindfulness of breathing leads to the uprooting of underlying tendencies. Monks, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to the uprooting of underlying tendencies. And how monks is Oh, you highlighted that one now. It is in this way, monks,
I'm sorry.
concentration...
I'm sorry. I thought that you had read both. Sorry.
And how monks is concentration by mindfulness of breathing, developed and cultivated so that it leads to the uprooting of underlying tendencies. It is in this way, monks, that concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it leads to the uprooting of underlying tendencies.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So the underlying tendencies are referred to as a few things. The underlying tendencies can be referred to as the 3 poisons, the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires, right? Those craving, anger, and ignorance. That's oftentimes referred to as the underlying tendencies that the mind has. So that's just another way of talking about the pollution of the mind, that the breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the elimination of the pollution of the mind. Another way to think about it too is that as you're making your way to enlightenment and you've eliminated the 5 lower fetters and you're starting to work on the upper fetters, you're going to notice that your mind's actually quite peaceful with those 5 lower fetters being gone. You're going to notice that maybe once every 2 months, once every 6 months, you kind of get a little bit of ickiness in the mind. And it's very short-lived. It's maybe a few seconds, maybe upwards of 30 seconds at most, and boom, it's out of the mind. And nobody else even knows that you're actually experiencing that discontentedness. It's all internal in the mind. So you're going to be quite peaceful in that 3rd stage of enlightenment. But you're going to still have these little underlying tendencies, these little underlying things that you might be doing. You might be yanking on your ear every once in a while. You might be kind of adjusting your nose, just kind of like in a repetitive thing, because there's still restlessness in the mind at this point. There's still some residual craving and clinging that's in the mind. And you might notice this little bit of underlying tendencies where the mind's kind of pulling in these little simple ways that other people aren't going to notice and know that are even there, but you're going to notice. So you're going to need to continue with your breathing mindfulness meditation, even during that period of time where, it's been 3 months, 6 months, you're not experiencing any discontentedness, just a little bit of ickiness here and there. You're going to need to still stay dedicated to your meditation. And this is going to help you to uproot the 3 poisons, those 3 unwholesome roots, but also those other little tiny things just where there's residual clinging that's left over in the mind, these underlying tendencies. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this one. Okay, I don't see any questions. All right, so now we'll go to number 10, chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha.
Concentration by mindfulness of breathing leads to the full understanding of the path. Monks, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to the full understanding of the path. And how, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it leads to the full understanding of the path? It is in this way, monks, that concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it leads to the full understanding of the path.
Okay, so thank you, Samantha. This is just another way of saying that this breathing mindfulness meditation fulfills true wisdom and liberation. It's just another way of him saying it, that you have this full understanding of the path. That's where you're practicing full wisdom of the entire path. So it's not just this meditation. There's all these other things that you need to learn. But if you just looked at this discourse in isolation, somebody might think, Eureka, I found it. All I need to do is breathing mindfulness meditation, and it's going to lead to the full understanding of the path. That's not true. It's one component of an entire practice that's going to lead you to fully understanding the path, because it's addressing the underlying problem in the mind, which is the craving, desire, attachment. It's helping you to get rid of that. But there's all this other stuff that you need to learn in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So the Buddha's just using another choice of words here to say that this breathing mindfulness meditation is leading to enlightenment, a full understanding of the path, final knowledge, true wisdom, and liberation. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this discourse. Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
It's not really a question, but when I read your teachings for this particular chapter, I know you've said it before, but this was a good reminder to me that when you're doing the mindfulness breathing and meditation, that you're practicing the entire path at one time. So, which I remembered you saying, but what I didn't remember was that the Gama is of the highest quality. And so, because I was about to ask why, because there's no harm being produced. So there's absolutely no way you could be producing all harmful or unwholesome Gama while you're meditating.
Exactly. During that period of time, for whatever amount of time that you're meditating, there's no unwholesome Gama being produced. You're practicing the entire path, aside from right livelihood, if someone's not having a right livelihood, but you're practicing the entire path at that point. And it's the highest quality of Gama because it's all factors of the path coming together in one specific practice. And now you're going to experience the benefits. That's why right after your meditation, you're going to experience, whatever you experience in terms of the improvement, because you're there applying, all the factors to be able to eliminate craving, desire, attachment from the mind and cultivate those wholesome qualities. So that's why the Buddha really prioritized it as like the highest quality of wholesome Gama that you could ever produce.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So as you guys see, there's that middle section that we're just going to be skipping over because it's a lot of reading and it's the same thing. And if you've read it a few times yourself, we don't really need to read it, all the time for each individual discourse. You're going to see that coming up some more as well. But the rest of the book, we're going to go into some other details about breathing mindfulness meditation and what the Buddha is teaching on this topic. So if you'd like to take your time in reading these chapters before or after class, that's always helpful for you. We're going to be in this book for a few more weeks, and then we're going to be into volume 8, which is the Foremost Householder. So tomorrow, I'm going to be restarting the group learning program from the very beginning for those of you guys that are interested in retaking that, or if you know people that are interested in taking it. So at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., I'll be doing the group learning program very first class. And then about, I'd say, about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks from now. Yeah, is it 10? No, it's about 7-8 days from now. I'm going to be starting a retreat. It's called Purification of the Mind to Attain Enlightenment. This is where all the other programs and everything that we do lead up to this particular retreat, where I spend about an hour to an hour and a half on each one of the fetters. And I explain what is the fetter, what is the symptom of those fetters or that particular fetter, how to eliminate that fetter, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. I'm going to be teaching from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. in Chiang Mai. Then we take a 6-hour break, and then I come back and I teach at 6:30 in the evening till 8:30 in the evening. So depending on your time zone, you might be able to take some of those live, or you can watch the recordings. Because for some of you guys, you might be ready to really start focusing in on each individual fetter to be able to understand those in detail. So that's the retreat that I teach once a year in order to be able to help students to understand that. And I've taught it other times, so it's been recorded. But if you would like to focus on that, that's an option for you coming up as well. So thank you all very much for attending. Thank you for participating. And perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee-ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.